Hi, welcome to the Shepherd's Rest Doc Talk. This is episode 94A.
I'm Cam and this is Julie. This week's Torah portion, we're still in Leviticus 21 to the end of 24, which would be 24-23. As we know, Leviticus is all about being holy, set apart, and drawing near. And so this week we're continuing on the same theme, but we're looking at how the priests are being told to draw near, even more so, be more set apart than just Israel. Remember, it's Israel, then it's the Levitical line, and then it's the sons of Aaron, the priest.
Yeah.
And each one of those get to draw closer to the Lord, and therefore they can't look all the same. They have to look a little different. Their functions are different, okay? I'm trying to not redo what we did in last year's portion, which was 44A and 44B. I am going to try to just concentrate on a few things that we didn't look at last year.
And don't worry, I won't redo last year's portion.
No, because hers is the Brit Hadashah, and this year it's the prophets. So yeah, no overlapping there. Let's start with, a topic that we often, grapple with this day and age is tattoos. If we look in Leviticus 21, verse 4, it says, "A leader does not profane himself among his people to profane himself. They do not make any bald place on their heads, and they do not shave the corners of their beard, and they do not make cuts or cutting in their flesh." Now, if you go over to Leviticus 19, 27 and 28, it's talking about the rounding of the beard, same topic. In 28, it says, "And do not make any cuttings in your flesh for the dead, nor put tattoo marks on you, for I am YHVH." All right, so the reason why I'm kind of looking at these two together is right above this verse from Leviticus 21 is talking about who they can go see, who's died in their family.
Oh, okay.
So it's having to do with death. So a lot of people will look at 19 and go, well, see, as long as you don't have a tattoo that's
for the dead,
commemorating the dead, Papa rest in peace, or something like that, or whoever you may be commemorating in your tattoo. So you'll have people who say, well, that's fine. Or the cutting. Well, I'm not cutting myself, which tattoo requires cutting. I'm not cutting myself for the dead. I'm doing it because this is a cool tribal tattoo who I belong to. Or I'm doing it because this is my favorite unicorn picture. Or whatever it is
because
that you're
it's
doing.
the cool thing to do.
Yeah, right, because it's cool looking. And while I would say if you're looking at it as this is the law, letter of the law, period, okay. And, that's where you have to grapple with that, work out your salvation daily, right? But if we went the spirit of the law, I would say that if you look at the history of tattooing, it having to do with the dead, it also has to do with ownership. It has to do with showing who you belong to. So someone wants to, maybe they're a part of a group. Hell's Angels is a great example of that for today. Or also it used to be used to show what your profession was. So if we look at it in the grand scheme of things, really when we are doing that, we're saying we're naming who we belong to and what ownership is there. Yet we have a perfect example of the Lord who does a tattooing, a marking of us. In Ezekiel 9:4 and in Revelation 9:4, he talks about sealing, marking his people on the forehead.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So he puts a mark.
Yeah.
Also the cutting, circumcision. He circumcises, obviously the flesh, but he also circumcises the heart.
Yes.
That we all participate in.
Yes.
So the Lord's the one that does the cutting. He's the one that does the marking, okay? So when we take it upon ourselves to do it, we're almost saying, no thanks. I'll say where I go. I'll say what I do. I own this body, the Lord has given it to us to give back to him.
Right.
So when we don't give back to him, then we just claim ownership and do whatever we want to with it. So that's how I would look at tattoo and marking. The word for seal or marking that the Lord uses in Ezekiel, it was Ezekiel 9:4, is actually Tav. The letter Tav, the spelling out of Tav, is the covenant. So he's actually marking them with the sign of the covenant. So he talks about on their forehead, so it can't be the circumcision of the heart. That has to be a part of it. But I don't know what the sign looks like. I don't know if it's going to be the Tav. The Tav in the ancient writing looks like an X or a cross falling kind of over, So it'll be interesting. What do you think it is?
I had this thought just the other day when I was driving on my way to Houston to visit my mom. I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if the mark was the Aleph Tav?
Yeah, but that would
The
make
covenant.
perfect sense. Yes. Well, that's what Tav means, is covenant by itself.
Right.
But I like the Aleph Tav because he is the first and the last.
Yeah.
So that would definitely put the mark of the whole
Yeah.
on it. Yeah. That I like that even better. But we know by scripture that Tav is the mark is the Tav.
Yeah.
So from there, I wanted to jump real quick, kind of fits with the daughter. That is in 21:9. It speaks of the daughter of the priest, and it says, "And when the daughter of any priest profanes herself by whoring, she profanes her father. She is burnt by fire." Now, if you remember last week, we talked about the fathers making the daughters whore, and that was in 19:29. It said, "Do not profane your daughters by making her a whore, so that the land does not whore and the land becomes filled with wickedness." So I want to show a difference between these two. They're both daughters, okay? This one is daughter of the priest, okay? The one here in Leviticus 19 is the daughters of Israel.
Okay.
Different level.
Okay.
Also, one is being made to whore and one is choosing to do so. The one who is from the priest, who knows the intricate details of worshiping the Lord, decides on her own, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
So when we speak about the harlot, I guess in the end, what ends up making up the harlot is the one who has come to the understanding and chosen that path. That's why she's burned. And we know the harlot in Revelation is burned. But as we talked about last week, we become the harlot because we don't know any better. But before that final judgment, as the grace and mercy is always there, the Lord says, come out, right?
Yes.
Come out of her. So he's going to reveal to us how we are going to, or the truth, so that we can come out. But once we're given that truth, now we become responsible for go with the truth or go with the tradition of man. And that's the threshold that many of us stand at, the fork in the road. But once you choose, you go down that road, all right? Mm-hmm. Now, there's always forgiveness, right? I mean, and that, again, is whenever we're being drawn out and accept that, we're forgiven, and then we start over. We're out of that harlot. We're no longer a part of her, right? Now let's jump over to chapter 23, and we're going to look at the feast and the festivals, so we have a better understanding of how they work and why we celebrate them. When you move into 23, it starts with the weekly Sabbath. That's the first thing. Again, because it's taking us all the way back to Genesis 2, well, Genesis 1, but Genesis 2, where the Lord speaks of the Sabbath, right? Mm-hmm. He says, I will do no work, all right? He rests. And that's what we're to do. There's an interesting thing on the weekly Sabbath in 23:3. It says in the middle of it, you do no work. It is a Sabbath to the Lord for all your dwellings. Okay, to the Lord. So first of all, everything we're doing in here is for the Lord. This isn't Jewish.
Right.
This isn't churchish. This isn't our making. This is the Lord saying, hey, my body does this. This is what I do. Therefore, if you're in my body, this is what you do.
Yeah. Ooh,
all right?
That's good.
So, yeah. So, the Sabbath in Genesis, like I said, 2:2, he says that he rested on the seventh day and did no work. Therefore, we do this, okay? We also see, and I have heard this, and I wasn't real comfortable with it, but they're like, well, we don't really have to get together on these days. However, you notice that the wording in 23, all through 23, like again, 23:3, it says, 6 days work is done, and on the seventh day is a Sabbath of rest, a holy gathering. Well, I don't know what that is if that doesn't mean get together with people. So we're called to meet together, to have a holy convocation, all right? So if you're in a place that you're like, well, I don't have anybody to convocate with, and you're live streaming, hey, at least you have it in one direction, and that's good. You're learning, you're growing. And spiritually, I think of Paul, where Paul talks about
he's in jail.
Yes, yeah. He's in jail, and he's like, hey, I'm with you there in spirit, all right? And I think he says it in Romans too, where I'm with you in spirit. Right. So it's the same idea. You are of the same spirit. Yeah. In the same spirit and with them in spirit. So I would say that qualifies just as much for being involved and gathering, when you're in a position that you can.
Very good.
Then next we have the beginning of Passover. Now, obviously, we have that in multiple places in Exodus 12, and we have this understanding of why we do it. I mean, we have very clear understanding. We do this in remembrance of being brought out of Egypt.
Right.
All right. We have the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is actually when Israel's walking out. Mm-hmm. So we have the Passover lamb on the 14th of the first month of the months or the calendar year that counts Israel as a nation.
Right.
Not the first month of the civil year,
right,
which counts the growth pattern. And I'm just going to throw this out there. I know that there are people who say, well, no, all the year changed to Nisan 1, but it didn't. Or else, how would Israel be standing apart in understanding who Israel is? It's not that way. Another way you know this is the Lord speaks of the first and the second, the latter rains. The latter rains are always in the spring. Had the spring begun the year, then they would now be called the first rains, right, not the latter. So we show, that shows that we have two calendars that we work with. I just thought I'd throw that out there. Okay, so back to this. We have clear understanding of why we do Passover, all right? So there's really not a lot that needs to be gone over in this because we've gone over it so many places. So then we move down. Now, what I do want to talk about is the first fruits. That is of the barley. So the first harvest is the barley harvest. No one could eat of it until the first fruits happen. So that means that you are eating the barley of the previous year up until this time. So whatever you ate for the Passover, your unleavened bread for unleavened bread was not made of this new barley.
Right.
It had to be made of last year's wheat or barley of last year. Then it would be, so the 15th of Nisan was I keep saying first fruits, was unleavened bread. Then from there you would go to the Sabbath. Mm-hmm. And once that Sabbath, that Saturday Sabbath, the rest came, then you would move and count. Now, if we look at 10, it says that when you come into the land. So the first fruits idea is going to happen when you're in the land, which means this never happened when they were out in the wilderness. Which means Moses never got to participate in this. Oh. Then in 11, we see that the priests are going to wave the Emor, okay? And the Emor is about, well, the Chumash says it's about 43 eggs.
Oh, okay.
That's how you know average size eggs. 43 of them is about what?
Is it size or the weight?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question because I was thinking like eggs, just pile them up. But it could be the weight.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because it does say average size eggs. Good question. All right. So we see that the priests are going to wave that in verse 11. It says, on the morrow after the Sabbath. So this is where there's a lot of contention as to, well, maybe that means after the 15th, which is a Sabbath, or maybe it means after the Sabbath. However, even in the Chumash, it presents both. It says, well, because it does say the rest, the Sabbath that's considered a full rest is only the weekly Sabbath.
Right.
Not the holiday Sabbath.
Yeah.
When we look at this over in verse 15 and 16, we see that you are to count for yourself 7 complete Sabbaths until the morrow after the 7th Sabbath. You count 50 days. So this tells me if it says the morrow after the 7th Sabbath, that means that it has to be a Sabbath and then count. If I have a Sabbath of a festival on a Tuesday, 7 Tuesdays is not going to be a Sabbath.
Right.
The 7th Sabbath, the day after, that means that has got to be Sabbath, boom, 50 days.
Right.
So the only way you can do that is starting on a Saturday Sabbath.
Yeah.
To get a full count.
Right.
So I still don't get how those who want to go the other way and start counting on the 16th can actually get 7 Sabbaths and then the next day.
And to me, that's the whole reason he says to count. Because it's going to be different every year. It's going to be different.
Now, Shavuot, when we read in 23, we see that it is, we bring 2 loaves of bread, which have leaven in them, okay? Which is why you wave them. You don't burn them on fire because you cannot burn leaven on fire, okay, to the Lord. But this is to be eaten, to partake of. So this has leaven in it, and they just wave it. This is after the wheat harvest. So the first harvest with first fruits is called the barley harvest. The second harvest with the Shavuot, Pentecost, is the wheat harvest, all right? And they eat of it. Now, what's interesting is the book of Ruth is what's read on this night.
Yeah.
Understanding that the Goel, the kinsman redeemer, is coming.
Yes.
And that, look, Ruth is grafted in, has become one, and through her, the line is continued to perpetuate. The kingly line is actually what's perpetuated.
Right.
And they understand this. So this is what's read on that night, which is great. We do it, we read it, and it's a fun time knowing that you're celebrating this. And what a great way. For 50 days, you get to keep a commandment by counting the Omer. He allows us to be fully invested.
Yeah.
And looking forward to that. Now, one thing is, because Shavuot has to count from Passover or from first fruits, that means that you have to have participated in the first one to get anything from the second one.
Right.
You wouldn't even know the second one came if you didn't pay attention to the first one. And I thought about that because I thought, there are 3 feasts in which the males are required to go to Israel. That's Passover, okay? So unleavened bread, which obviously Messiah dies. Then it is Shavuot, which is Pentecost, and then it is Sukkot. So they're not required to be there for Yom Kippur or Feast of Trumpets.
Right.
But these 3, and the first, the Passover, is for 7 days, and Sukkot is 7 days. That's Tabernacles. And, well, obviously, the Shavuot is considered of weeks, right? But it's actually just a one-day event. Remember in Acts, it says that tongues of fire came down, right? And they're already in the wind. I mean, all these things that duplicate Exodus 19.
The Mount Sinai.
The Mount Sinai experience, right. Now, we know Passover is clearly for remembering leaving of Egypt. Yet it seems like we would know that Shavuot would be for Sinai. Why wouldn't it say remember Sinai? But it doesn't. For whatever reason, it doesn't say it. Yet it is clearly taught by the sages that that is when it happened. This is why, and we kind of have verification by the fact that Acts 2 is repeating what happened on 19. That's what they were looking for. They were understanding that this is when tongues of fire and all these things came down. So they're looking for that. So just because we don't see it clearly in here, there are hints to it. I can't go into that. But Rabbi Foreman, David Foreman, does a great job. He goes into all the kinds of hints, and it's fascinating. But like I said, we don't have time for that. So now let's jump down and look at where it speaks of Yom Teruah. That's in verse 24. This is talking about hearing the trumpets, okay? And Teruah is a shout, a call. It's an alarm, which is different than a shofar. A shofar is what was used on Mount Sinai. It's a ram's horn, a call. The Jubilee uses that same term.
Right.
But this one is considered a warning. And I thought it's interesting because it says a remembrance. But what are they remembering? Because nothing really happened on that date as far as Israel walking through the wilderness. This is a remembrance, and it's an alert. It's a call. Now, it's a call to battle, but it can also be a call to joy. And I thought, well, what side of the coin are you on? Right?
Yeah.
This is, these are the fall feasts. These are what Messiah will do when he returns.
And the Haftorah discussion is in Ezekiel 44 about the temple. And Ezekiel says that it's on this day that he got the vision of the temple.
There you go. Well, and remember
which side of the coin you're on. Because as we go through it, we're going to see that some were on the wrong side of the coin because they weren't doing what they were supposed to do, and some were on the correct side.
Right, yeah. That's how you're going to see it. And a lot of times people talk about the last trumpet. Now, Yom Teruah, which is the Feast of Trumpets, is a 25-hour feast. It's basically 2 days because it's the only one that's on a new moon. So you don't know exactly the day or the hour, hint, that it's going to be declared.
Right.
Just like we don't know the day or the hour that Messiah will come. But what we do know is the season. If you're children of the light, 1 Thessalonians 5, then you're not taken by surprise because you understand the seasons. You understand these events, the feasts. You understand where you should be and what you should be doing, right? You should be partaking. Right, Moedim is the Hebrew name for the appointed times. When you see in 23, now we're moving to Yom Kippur, it's actually plural. It's Yom Kippurim. So it's not just the atonement, it's the atonements. Because it's for the people, it's for the tabernacle, it's for all the pieces in the tabernacle, it's for the nation of Israel. right?
It's for the whole
So
shebang.
there's multiple atonements being done. Well, through Messiah, there were multiple things done also. It wasn't just for individuals, okay?
Right.
There's a lot more to it. And, again, like we suggested last week, there's going to be a second half to that whole service that will be fulfilled when Messiah comes again. Yom Kippur is a fast day, and it's interesting because it's a fast day and not just a no civil work, it's no work at all.
Yeah, you're
This is
fasting.
very serious because there are two, yeah, exactly, you're fasting. Yom Kippur is the holiest day of the year. You fast, you literally give up all your desires, and you just concentrate on Him. That's what you do. You don't do any work, like she said, because you're not eating. It makes it much easier to fast when you don't have to work. All right, so 5 days after that is what is called Sukkot, which is the Feast of Tabernacles. Oh my gosh! Now this is a remembrance, but there isn't a single small event that happened yet.
Not yet.
It's
Unless that's when
remembering
Messiah came.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'll hop on that in a minute. So it is them in the wilderness, Israel in the wilderness. That's what it's to remember, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And there is a thought that Messiah was either born at trumpets or at Sukkot. I like to think Sukkot because everyone is demanded to party for 7 days.
Yeah.
I mean, why not have a big old birthday party?
Mm-hmm.
Also, remember, it's the men that are required to go to the temple, not the women. So she could have easily had a baby on that day. And because one of the things, well, you have to be at the temple for that. Then they wouldn't have. It's the men who are required to go, not the women. Wouldn't it be interesting if the whole reason why it only said men was just so that Yeshua could be born on this without the mother breaking
Torah?
Yeah, wouldn't that be cool? I'm just thinking, why would you have her breaking Torah while giving birth to Messiah? That doesn't make sense.
That doesn't make any,
at all. So anyway, Sukkot has to do with him reigning. We're going to see these things in the future. Let me jump back real quick to Yom Kippur. That is also the celebration of when Moses came down the second time with the commandments and the blueprints, all right? And so it's said by the sages that was when Israel knew for sure they're completely forgiven for the sin of the golden calf.
Mm-hmm.
And given the blueprints of what he's going to dwell in so that they can.
Yeah.
So, of course, when he
Just
returns...
like Ezekiel 44.
That's right. And when he returns, we're going to see that that's exactly what Messiah is doing there. The judgment of the nations is considered to be at this time or right after, in between Yom Kippur and Feast of Tabernacles or Sukkot. Again, Sukkot is 7 days long. On the 8th day is Simchat Torah, the rolling back of the Torah. I would suggest that his ruling becomes established for those in that 7 days when all the nations. We see in Numbers 29, all the things, the bulls, there are 70 bulls for all the 70 nations that are given because Sukkot is for the nations coming in, celebrating. Yom Kippur is for the nation of Israel. Sukkot, Tabernacle, is for the whole world. Yes.
Perfect sense. The king comes, judgment starts in the house of the Lord. Let's do Israel first, then we'll move to the nations.
That's right. And then the nations are celebrating with him during his reign. Then Simchat Torah, which is the 8th day, the rolling back of the scroll. Well, hello, rolling back the heavens like a scroll for a new heaven and new earth. And that will be the going into eternity.
Very good.
Yeah. So anyway, that kind of goes over these. There's so much more. I don't have time, obviously. I mean, these each festival, is a whole teaching of days within themselves. So anyway, I hope you guys have a marvelous week. We thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you on the flip side with Julie and the prophets.
Shalom.
Eating. It makes it much easier to fast when you're not eating.
Yeah.
Did I just say not eating? Wait. It makes it much easier to fast when you don't have to do any work.
Right.
Yeah.